Hi everybody, and welcome to the first episode of my own podcast, Nick Talks. Today I've got an amazing guest, Bavy Wall, who'll be talking in a minute, but let me tell you a little bit about Bavy, about how I met him. So during this summer of 2020, during my turmoil, I was sacked from the charity I founded, then I got my job back, and then I had several emails off about half a dozen people saying, can we meet and talk about what happened to you? And I made a decision that I was going to meet everybody who contacted me, regardless if I agreed with them or not. And Bavy was one of those people. So I quickly Googled him and looked on his LinkedIn and went, oh, he teaches EDI, he teaches equality, diversity and inclusion. He's going to be a nutcase. But I said, I'm going to meet him. So I'm going to meet him. So we met in Manchester City Centre, we had a pint, and 7 hours later, drunk, we became very good friends. And his version of EDI is the way it should be taught, not the woke, crazy lunatics who are trying to teach it now. So I'll let Bavy talk a little bit more about that himself. So first of all, welcome Bavy Wall to the first episode of Nick Talks.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to be here, Nick, and thank you for having me on. I am a lunatic, by the way.
and I know that. After 7 hours of drinking, I know that. But you're a good lunatic. You're not a bad lunatic.
Good, so, that makes all the difference.
So my first question is, Bavy, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, I as you say, I was and still do to a certain degree teach EDI, although that's been somewhat hijacked by the lunacy of the last few years. And I've been interested in equality and diversity and inclusion probably for 30 years. Well, that's, a long time. And I can remember the days when people used to interview women and say to them, "Are you going to get pregnant, Mrs.?" And you think, what are you saying? Just stop. So it was when things were really bad, long before we had any kind of Equality Act or any kind of equality in law. And then I was involved in a university project which was driven by EDI. And then along comes the nonsense that you and I finally found ourselves brought together over, which completely reverses EDI and turns it into DIE, D-I-E. So you have EDI, which is equality of opportunity, diversity of thought, and inclusivity in action. And then you have DIE, which is diversity of immutable characteristics, inclusivity in the in-group, and equity, which you and I both know leads to murderous outcomes. And it's DIE that is currently being taught in schools and in universities to the detriment of everyone. It's a very dangerous, flattening idea, isn't it?
It is. I've wrote about equity, and if we want to get to poor services, a failing society, and mass murder, equity is a route we go down.
Does it every time? Does Mao, Pol Pot, you name them, every time equity takes us there. We know this. We've got history now that can tell us, and also the ability for everybody to understand it. But there seems to be an awful lot of people who refuse to engage with the idea that this might be wrong, So that was really where I was until I found myself embroiled in an argument about Black Lives Matter, which I think was the same sort of thing as you did. And then gradually came to realize that there was something terribly wrong in the state of Denmark. And actually what we were seeing was the end of something called the Long March through the institutions, which I know you and I have discussed before. So that brought me to the point where I created this character called the EDI Jester, which was designed to poke the bear. That was all it was designed for. And suddenly I had 15,000 followers. I'm like, right, okay, what do I do now? And what I was saying was becoming popular. Well, that, of course, instantly brought me to the attention of Twitter, who, without any warning, banned me. So the Jester died there, but he didn't really.
So let's get into the Jester bit a little bit deeper. So what was the Jester?
Well, the Jester was essentially a character that could say truth to power. The idea of the Jester was that I could express the feelings outside of my personal life in a way that was scathing, cutting, rude, ignorant, and generally how I could express myself as somebody who was extremely angry at what I was seeing happen, not just to Britain, but to my community as a gay man, to people in my constituency, and the way that gay men and lesbians were being treated by these utter lunatics. So that was what really drove me to create something that meant that I could say what I felt and express it in the rather wonderful world of Twitter, where really the battleground of free speech, where people go, oh, it's a cesspool, it's a cesspool. Yeah, but it's you're also able to get hold of an expert in one tweet. You know, you're also able to research in a way that you never could on the internet, because you can get people who will provide you with the most wonderful resources. So it's actually a curate's egg. You know, it's
So
brilliant part.
tell me a little about what were the things you were discussing and talking about. So give me some of the mild examples, because obviously this is going on YouTube and I don't want my first podcast to get me kicked off YouTube.
Right. So so it was. I mean, I began by seriously kicking back against the idea that sex is not immutable. That was the one for me that started me off. Because if sex is immutable, so sexuality, in which case I don't exist. I thought, yeah, that'll do. You know, your upcoming obsolescence should be something that you should be concerned about. So I began to rage about that. Then I started the Patreon blog, the Jester Patreon blog, and then wrote about various things that came up, particularly about the universities and what was happening with capture in the universities by these ideologies, and then moved from there onto wider matters, and certainly matters of concern to people who live in the LGBT constituency. So it's spread its wings a little bit, and from there I then started the podcasts that I do, which are now predominantly around current things that are happening, similar to the idea that things that we're discussing here, which allowed me to talk about very specific instances, things like what's happening at Manchester Pride, what do gay people need to know, or what's going on politically, and how should we start to look at things. So, I mean, there's no reason why anybody should listen to me as a culture commentator, but they do. I'm like, well, if you're going to keep listening, I'm going to keep talking.
So give me the number one issue you have that you think's affecting the gay community.
The number one issue is the inaction of gay men. Now, lesbians are well aware of what's going on, and they've been warning us for a number of years, and we have sadly let them down. And gay men need to wake up and smell the coffee, because they are actually supporting something which eradicates their reality. So the same gender attracted, not same sex, according to Stonewall mermaids and all that lot. You know, the
And that basically means if I'm a woman and I identify as a man, that means you as a gay man should find me attractive and should have sex with me because I'm telling you I'm a man, even though I'm a biological woman.
That's right.
And that's lunacy.
Yeah, that's lunacy. Right. So you've got them, we call them LARPers, because they appear every now and again. You get some girl who thinks she's a man, thinks she's a gay man. Oh, I'm a gay man. I'm expanding what it means to be a lesbian, is the other one from that famous fool. So it works both ways. I think it's more dangerous the other way. I think lesbians are really having a hard time with it. The cotton ceiling, we've discussed that before, you know, where they trained trans women how to get past the barriers of lesbians who wouldn't recognize them as women because obviously they're men, you know, that kind of thing. But it's also happening within gay communities, these LARPing women pretending they're gay men, and gay men need to go, no, you can not having it. Sorry, we're same-sex attracted. That's how they made us a criminal. You know, they persecuted us because of our sexuality, not because of our genderality, if there's even such a word. You know, if you're attracted to somebody by gender, then you're attracted by the clothing they're wearing. But that's nuts. You know, so it's I'm a gay man. No, you're a woman. You're a genital fetishist. That's what you get then, isn't it? You're a genital fetishist. No, I like men. What does it matter? I'm a man. What does it matter what's between your legs? It's like, right, okay, gay men, wake up, smell the coffee. These are not our bedfellows in any way, let alone physically. So it's for gay men need to wake up and smell the coffee, because they certainly haven't yet.
And what is stopping gay men from waking up and smelling that coffee?
Fear.
Fear of what?
Opprobrium, fear of being banished from their own, what they see as a community, and also the fact that they can't recognize that this what seems to be a be kind movement and be nice movement is actually a far right funded boondoggle for corporations and for drug companies, because of course they're farming children, and that's what they don't understand, because it sounds so tin hat. You're like, get your tin hat on, this is an absolute conspiracy theory, but actually the truth is that in America now they're performing surgeries on children as young as 13 and 14, and there's money in it. Thankfully we have social medicine, which strangely enough I think has been the blocker to this. The closure of the Tavistock is coming up. And then they're going to open up more regional centres, which will have a holistic approach, which means they'll be working with psychologists, with sociologists. They're going to be looking at researchers, will be embedded in the organisations, and I think we'll see an end to it then, because you put children on a social transition, so they're 12, they start pretending they're the other sex. That social transition is not neutral. Cash report and all that, so it's not neutral. So I've still got the Jester, and the Jester is able to say things that I can't. What's amazing is when I meet people who met me online, have met me online, seeing the Jester speak, and they'll say, "You actually are not like him at all, are you?" No, no, I'm much more reasonable in real life. You want to take on the Jester, feel free. But I'm much more reasonable in real life than the Jester is, because the Jester is the statement. It's like, here's what's.
Let me put the hypothesis to you about gay men, why they're not fighting back the way they should be. And I have a feeling that gay men have had it so good for so long, they are, just like the rest of the population, they don't want to rock the boat, and they think what they have now is normal and will always continue.
Well, I would say that's, you can apply that to anyone, because the idea of the liberal, pact, i.e. the liberal way of thinking is always going to be on the up, that actually we're not going to ever descend, was always an insane notion. And you've only got to look back on history to see that things are all right one minute and they've gone pear-shaped the next. Again, you can go back to Mao in China, or Pol Pot, or any of these kinds of regimes. So gay men, I think it's a difficult one, because the vast majority of gay men don't live on the scene and don't live on Canal Street, or don't live locally. There's many gay men that just get on with their bloody lives with their partners. Well, most of them don't even know what's going on. It's only because the institutions that we trusted, Stonewall and the LGBT Foundation and Manchester Pride, appear to have fallen for this nonsense. And those institutes that we trusted have let us down. But you have to be part of that sort of milieu in order to recognize that they've let you down. It's a hard pill to swallow, that what you thought was who you are is wrong. So it destroys your map of meaning, Nick. You know this because we've had it both happen to us. It shatters you, right? And that's not an easy thing to face. And we've both got friends who have been through a process. And I've spoken to you about the Winning Mindset course, which is the Warrior Teacher course, where we talk about how that process works in individuals. And it's deeply depressing when you begin to realize how wrong you have got it.
It shatters your whole life. Your whole foundation, you realize, is built on sand.
Yes.
And then what you thought was up wasn't really up anymore. And then you've got to figure out everything you've taken for granted for decades. And that's why some people don't want to change, because it's easier to carry on with the make-believe than having to say, I need to rechange and relook at everything I thought was factual.
Well, it's interesting because it was we were discussing in the Warrior Teacher program the other night, I think it's session 7, I think, about the difference between sympathy and empathy, and everybody forgets the third one, which is apathy. Right? And apathy is a solution, Nick. You can understand why people don't want to get involved. And I think it's hard, but then when you've got people around you going, hang on a minute, I'm getting this now, eventually the guilt will get to you. And at that point, you either disengage or you engage. So I suppose, for most gay men, or for most people that are involved in this, particularly gay men, because that's generally who I'm speaking to, it's fine. Have your apathy, just don't get in the way.
I think one of my big worries for all of this, for gay men, is if we get a backlash to the nonsense, such as if we get a backlash to the over-sexualization of children, to queer theory, gender ideology, and when the backlash comes, because suddenly society goes slightly more to the right, my fear is gay men will take the brunt of that backlash, because I think the people who call themselves queer and non-binary will all disappear back into the crowd and go, oh, I was never queer, I was never non-binary. But as a gay man, you're a gay man, and you can't change you being a gay man. So you'll still be a gay man. And when the fingers start wagging and we're looking for people to point out blame, I fear gay men may take the brunt of that.
I think you make an excellent point. I spend a lot of time firefighting, and you mentioned about people with pushing stuff on children, like gender ideology and queer theory on children. And it's I've done various blogs about this, and particularly about drag queen storytime, which they call it. It's not drag queen storytime, it's queer performativity, and that's a different thing. Drag queen would stand up and do family fortunes. Name a bird with a long neck, Naomi Campbell, it'd be that kind of thing. That is not what this is. This is something else altogether. It's what they're reading that's the issue. And to a certain degree, at least we can see them in plain sight, because they're there now. The difficulty is that that's an opportunity for the far right like you wouldn't believe. Now, the other thing is that I don't necessarily agree with your contention that the society is going more to the right. I don't think society has budged much at all. I think it's the Overton window that shifted, and what was seen as perfectly normal and perfectly harmonious for the vast majority of people in this country going back 10 years ago is now seen to be far right. Reality, for goodness sake, meritocracy. I mean, who has a problem with meritocracy unless they're a nutter? When I go to get surgery, I want the best surgeon. You don't ring up a plumber and say, "Are you mediocre?"
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've said to many people,
Rubbish.
if you're lying on a stretcher in a hospital and you need open heart surgery, you're there thinking to yourself, I want the best surgeon here. He can be Muslim, he can be gay, he can be a foreigner. I just want the best. I don't care. And that's because,
it.
yeah.
That's it. I remember when I had my operation, as you know, the surgeon was saying to me, "Now, what we'd like to do is," and I just said to him, "How good are you at this?" And he just said, I was top of my class. And I said, "What would you tell your father?" And he said, "Have the operation." I said, "That's all I need." Right? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't want to elect to do it. You tell me. You're the expert. It'd be like me to going to get the car MOT'd and saying, "Now, this is what's wrong with it."
But if he said to you, "Oh, Bavi, I'm glad I'm operating on you because my quota on operating on gay men has been quite low this month,
Yeah, can you imagine?
and you're going to raise my quota. So thank you for being ill because my quota's." You're thinking to yourself, what sort of surgery and operation is this going to be?
Well, it's the insanity of identity politics is illustrated by that. And I was saying to my the nurse that I see regularly, who's a great character, and I was saying to the nurse, how insane it is that identity politics seems to have captured the NHS, which it has, but also the fact that you end up in the most bizarre situation where people are more worried about your skin color or your sexuality than what your ability is. Well, this is bonkers, just nuts. It's so therefore you end up in a situation where you can be removed from Pride for being the wrong gay.
Well, I'm glad you've said that. That leads on to my next question. So, as a gay man, why don't you support Manchester Pride? Because that sounds quite shocking to most people.
Well, yes, it certainly does. And I think it's been quite shocking to most gay men who I say it to. I don't support them because they're far left identitarian lunatics with a queer and trans lens. It's not complicated to me because I've been studying this now for the best part of 3 years. But it's incredibly complicated for other people to get their head around.
And what does that mean? They're viewing it through a identity and queer lens.
Well, what the idea of queer theory is there are no barriers. None. And that's the scary bit. We're back in the 80s now.
Which means what?
Well, for example, Judith Butler in October or November of last year in an interview with Owen Jones said it is important that we break down all barriers, including the barrier between adult and child. Right, now we know what that shit means, especially the older gay men, because they've been around a bit. I remember how long it took us to get pie, dealt with. 2006 was when these guys finally went to jail. So these people have no sense of boundaries at all. And queer theory doesn't want any boundaries. And trans says that men can be women and women can be men. So you put those two together, and you've got a free-for-all. Right, so Manchester Pride are pushing that, and anti-racism, which itself is racist. I'm currently doing the analysis and archiving their website, so I've got the full thing to analyze, which is a report I'm sending to the EHRC to prevent to the police, particularly after the events of the Vigil, where an individual called for everybody to kill everybody. And what was the exact words? I don't say this lightly, but kill everybody in authority. What? What's that got to do with a vigil to remember people who died of AIDS?
And can I just say to people listening, this was somebody stood on stage who was an accredited speaker at the event. This wasn't someone from the audience shouting down a microphone. This was someone who'd given a speech, done a performance, and then at the end said, "Let's kill everybody in authority."
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely shocking.
It's insane. And then you had another group that stood up and accused the bars of being racist. I mean, it's just so it's all about power and oppression, and it's all about grievance. Now, I did a video which you may have seen about a particular essay that was put out before Pride by their EDI specialist, and it's just plain. It's like reading a jihadi script. It's absolutely insane. I've done the analysis for that. It's available on on my blog.
I'll put all these links in the description of this video, so they can go to your Patreon, they can go to your YouTube channel, they can go to these essays you've already wrote on these topics.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. That'd be really appreciated. I mean, it's Manchester Pride used to represent me, and I supported them for over 20 years. Not anymore. We're done. You know, they're more interested in pushing gender ideology. Now, you have to bear in mind that pushing gender ideology in schools, you can't do it. Gender identity ideology is a better way of talking about it, because gender ideology is a far-right trope, really. I've just learned that, so I'd have to change everything. But gender identity ideology is a better way to think of it. You know, I am what I say I am. Yeah, well, but no, you're not, right? Gay men live with the reality of their bodies every day. And they live, especially older gay men, live with the reality of what that meant when they were born. So I was a criminal till I was 21. You know, I couldn't have sex till I was 21. It's like most of these people that are screaming about this are 18, 19. And adults who obviously never left being 18 or 19 who were also screaming about it. So we can't have a situation whereby pride is usurped by essentially hard left, equity-driven, power and oppression narrative nut jobs.
So are you saying that Manchester Pride now does not represent gay men and lesbian women?
Absolutely. Now, they'll say they will, but they don't. Manchester Evening News managed to report on Pride without mentioning the word gay or lesbian once. Now Alexander noticed that, because Alexander's got a good eye. And Alexander's the guy that got kicked out of Pride, the Vigil. When he get kicked out, he got a letter telling me he couldn't go. That's Manchester Pride writing to a gay man who looks after Sackville Park, by the way, is not allowed to go to Sackville Park to mourn the people he knew died at a vigil for gay men because he doesn't believe trans women are women.
Let's get into this a bit deeper. So for people who don't know Manchester Pride, it's a 4-day weekend celebration. It used to be a celebration of being gay or lesbian. And on the Monday evening, I think it's 7 o'clock, there has always been a vigil in a little park next to the gay village called Sackville Street Gardens. And that vigil was remembering all the gay men who had died of AIDS in the 80s. So it was about lighting a candle and remembering those men. Would you say that's a correct summary?
Yeah, well, it was those men that died in the 80s and those since.
And
So
since, yeah.
it's a celebration, essentially a celebration of gay men and women and others, of course, who've died of AIDS.
Yeah.
So it's always looked at what's the situation anywhere in regards to that.
So it was really, and it should be, a somber ceremony for the tragic loss of individuals. Now,
I mean, and the decimation of a generation.
Yes, because you've said it to me many times before, where young gay men have said to you, "I don't meet many men your age," and you go, "Have a guess why?" And they never guess why.
They never guess.
And it's because AIDS killed all your friends.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
they all died. Yeah.
So let's go back to the vigil. So when did the vigil change? I remember big changes last year. That was the first time I noticed on social media that it seemed to turn into clown world, really. It wasn't somber anymore. It was a party. Some woman got her breasts out on stage. They were shouting things. I think someone shouted "Black Power." It didn't seem to be anything more about the loss of men through a terrible disease.
Well, I'm looking now. My analysis now goes back to 2020. I don't want to take it back too far because 2020 is enough. And the writing was on the wall then. They had homophobes at the Human Rights Forum. It's a human rights forum at Manchester Pride, and they've got 2 renowned homophobes speaking. It's like, you've lost your way, kids. You know, you've lost your way. And that was 2020. And then they had a big screen, and this person came on screen to do a poem, and then finally went, whipped her breasts out so I can show you my cockles, I think she said. And then there was somebody on stage at the vigil going, shout Manchester, scream, as if it was a fucking party. And you're like, what are you doing? Right, the whole point of the vigil was 36 hours of party, right? Really heavy stuff. Let's just get it all, have a good time, dance, and do foolish things, and then we all come together at the end, and that's it. Everybody leaves. It's like, never forget what got us this, and they've completely eradicated that by allowing people with an agenda that is not the same as ours to become to the fore. But not only that, they mixed it up this year, so you've got a bit of both, and it's even worse. I mean, the most appalling thing that they did this year, and I was fuming about this, they took the pink triangle. Now, people will probably understand, but just so that people know if they don't, when the Holocaust occurred, as Jewish people were given yellow stars, gay people were given pink triangles, right? And those pink triangles were an indicator that they would be likely to be imprisoned or sent to a work camp or even gassed, right? They took the pink triangle and they put chevrons in it. They put the chevrons to indicate gender identity, ideology, and queer theory in the pink triangle, and then they superimposed the face of Alan Turing over it. Now, Alan Turing was given the same drugs as they're now given to children to block puberty, and he then subsequently killed himself. And these people are using this to push their foul agenda.
Something I tweeted the other day. New religions, when they want to conquer the old religion, they assimilate the old religion's traditions, and they take over their places of worship and places of importance. Because what a new religion wants to do is take over the congregation, but in such a simple way that the congregation doesn't realize it's a new religion.
Well, that's exactly what Stalin did. I mean, what kind of dictator would Stalin have been if he couldn't have exploited the religiosity of the Russian people who believed that the Tsars were gods? You know, so that was it. So, I mean, it's not on the same scale from our perspective as gay men. You could look at it on that scale worldwide, globally, certainly. When I went to Egypt and I went to Karnak to see the temple, you could see where the Christians had arrived and tried to erase all of the hieroglyphics. They'd scrape them all off in order to replace whatever it is that's come before. That's how all cults have worked right throughout history.
Absolutely. So my last question is concerning pride. So there's a gay gentleman in Manchester called Alex, and he is a volunteer at Sackville Street Garden. So he spends his time cleaning, picking up litter, and he's part of a community group that helps that garden. He is gender critical, so he's like you. He's got a lot of the same ideas and thoughts as you. And he was going to go to the Vigil to celebrate the lives of the men who went before, who died of AIDS and are still dying now. And he received a letter from Manchester Pride saying, "You're banned from attending this event, even though it's a publicly owned park in the city centre." Could you tell me a little bit more about that? Because that's quite shocking. How Pride have got to a stage now where they're banning gay men from attending.
It's surreal. I mean, and you remember the same thing happened to the lesbians in Cymru, in Wales. You know, they stopped them from marching with the Pride Parade. Alex, I mean, it's my belief that Alexander has been discriminated against by these people, and I imagine that if and he's a smart cookie, is Alexander, so I imagine that he will be seeking some kind of redress through perhaps the law or other formats. And part of the reason why I'm writing what I'm writing in terms of the report from Manchester Pride is because of Alexander. It's not on. You don't get to do that. So right? We're coming.
What exactly happened? What exactly happened to Alex?
Well, Alexander's been a thorn in their side for a while.
Like you.
Rather like me. Well, yeah. He's been at it longer than I have, to be fair. But I went with him to one of the consultations on what Pride should be. And you know, they're not bad people, Nick. You know, it's just they're trying to do their job, and we sat with a few people having conversations, but they fundamentally got it wrong, and they live in a bubble of their own. So it was very confected, you know, and it was all sort of, there was little tick sheets that you fit. They didn't want to actually have a conversation. You know, what should it be? Well, it should be about the community, right? Define the community. Well, no, we know what we mean. You know, it was a little bit confected, so which was fine. I mean, they've done some consultation. It's just that they don't like when anything gets too close. It's the same as their humanity pledge. Right, which is it's just totalitarian. It's just, you know, so that was it. And Alexander has been saying, you know, I want to go to these meetings. They've been sending him off all over the place, changing the last place the meeting is going to be had, putting it online instead so he can't get there. And they've actually said that his presence is making people unsafe. I mean, he's a smart British guy. He's a bit like me. He's eccentric in that respect. You know, and he knows his stuff when it comes to what he wants and does, and he's a thorn in their side. He turned up at one of the meetings with a poster just with the monkeypox cases in Britain, in Manchester and London at the moment. Because like him, I also think he's right. I think Manchester Pride would have been a super spreader event, right? If we're not careful, right? So now when LGBT Alliance put up saying the WHO's advice saying, listen, you need to watch out here. It's affecting gay men mostly at the moment. Everybody went mad. Manchester Pride didn't like it. They all didn't like it. They all wanted it taken down. Oh, so it turns out they were right. You know, so now they're all going, oh, be careful, be careful. Why do you mean be careful? Now, thankfully, we got our act together and there were enough vaccinations taking place prior to Pride. But Alexander was making the point, we need to look at what the figures are after. Oh, they didn't like that. So they called security and he was dragged out, literally dragged out of the meeting. That was at the Human Rights Forum. And in the Human Rights Forum, which they've also recorded, was just nonsense. It was just more nonsense with people on stage shouting into the void. And they've been captured by ideologues. There's no getting away from it. And I think the board must feel paralyzed because they're not dumb people. These are smart people, you know? So they're not stupid. I mean, the business about the pledge badge, that was amazing. You have to have a pledge badge in order to get served in a bar. Oh dear, right? So what they're saying is if I, as a gay man, don't buy a pledge band because I don't agree with the politics of the lobby group that is now Manchester Pride, I won't get served in a bar. Is it me or is that discrimination on belief?
Absolutely.
So I think that they could be in trouble here. So we'll see how it pans out. But things are moving, if somewhat slowly.
I think Manchester Pride new motto basically is we only support gay people if you're the right type of gay.
It's a good way of putting it. You know, and what gay man in his right mind is going to agree to the fact that he's same gender attracted? If you're same gender attracted, kid, you're bisexual. Right? You can't be same gender attracted and gay. You can't be gay and believe in gender identity, because if you do, you are undoing yourself. You are negating your own reality. I mean, they believe in a gender identity, which essentially means that we're flesh sacks that they fill with a gendered soul that's either masculine or feminine. I mean, this is insanity.
And don't forget that, and this gender soul can change minute by minute.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. You could be one thing Wednesday, next thing Wednesday afternoon. You know?
Yes.
All right then. Yeah. All right. You know. Yeah. Fine. Get on with it. So it is utter insanity, especially when gay men have lived through periods where, you know, the reality of your body is the thing. It's the thing. So there's that. You know, it's that kind of thing, and they don't understand or don't wish to understand that by doing what they think is being inclusive, they are actually damaging gay men and lesbians. Because we are. I mean, the lesbians treated appallingly in Wales. You know, this is not the first time. So they've got to get their head around the fact that TERFs are right. You might not like the fact that they are, but they're right. Okay. And somebody said to me the other day, "You a TERF?" And I said, "I can't be a TERF. I'm not a feminist." I said, "I'm a turd." They said, "What?" They said, "What's a turd?" I said, "It's a trans usurping radical daddy." So I think I'm going to go with that term. I don't, if somebody wants to dress as they want to dress, fine. If they want me to call them Mary instead of Mark, I don't care. What I care about is you can do that, but I'm not living in your insane unreality. If you think you're actually that, you're not. You know, and I certainly don't want it talk to children. Okay.
And I think that's the line where we've crossed now. You know, I think we all can agree that adults should be able to do whatever they want to do within the law with other consenting adults, and I don't care what anyone does. You should be able to do what you want in a free society. Where it crosses a line is in 2 points. The first point is when we start looking at vulnerable children, because all children are vulnerable, they're easily manipulated. And the second point is when you want me to validate your decisions. You can do what you want. I don't care, but I don't have to agree with them. I don't have to like them. All I have to do is give you the right to do it. And I will always give people the right to do it. I just don't have to agree with it, think it's a good idea, or think it's positive. I can actually disagree and think, I think that's horrendous, but you still should have the right to do it.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I say this every time, and Liz Truss was asked the question last night, you know, and she said, well, I respect trans people's rights to be who they are. I mean, I respect people's rights to be who they are, but all you actually get is tolerance. Respect's a weasel word, right? You don't get respect, you get tolerance.
You have to earn respect. You don't get respect, you earn respect.
It's like, people say, well, that's my identity. And I'm like, no. Your identity, you don't pick that. It's formed by others. We are social creatures. So you can stop with that nonsense, because I'm not going to believe you. You know, they'll tell you that, they'll say, I'm this, I'm that, I'm t'other. It was that. Do you remember the non-binary girl I told you about on Canal Street? I'm non-binary. Really? That's extraordinary. Male or female? Female. Out of the mouths, out of the mouths of babes. So what we've got really is a situation where people need to understand that people with dysphoria aren't the problem. That people with dysphoria should get every care they need. Right? It's rare, phenomenally rare. So we've got to make sure they get every care they need. That is not what this is. Right? So it's not people with dysphoria that are the problem. It's trans rights activists. And these are people who believe that just by putting on a bit of lippy and a skirt, you're a woman, or by shaving your head and putting on a pair of dungarees and a belt, you're a man. And I'm not having it.
Yep. And no one should be having it.
No, nobody.
Yeah. Right. That's great. Thank you much, Barry. That was a really good conversation. I hope people have learned a lot from that. I advise everybody to check out the description of this video. You can find all Barry's contacts there. The course he runs called the Warrior Teacher Program is absolutely excellent. Check that out and sign up to that if you can, if you want to learn more about this. And if you want to be formidable, talking and doing something about this, that's the program you sign up for. And hopefully I'll have you back very soon, Barry, and we can get into some of these points a lot more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nick. It's been brilliant.
Excellent. Thank you.